This is IBM Museum. And I have the IBM 7588 behind me on the bench. And I'm just going through and checking some things as I've discussed in prior videos. The first thing I want to do is just to flip over to the system as I go through and check the one factor that I'm going to be looking at here. Let's get switched over to our VGA. And of course, you can always hear this thing when it's in operation. IBM Industrial Systems are, they move the air through them. They're designed to try and keep the components cool. They also typically run their fans through filters to get the dust out of the air. So we do see that zip drive loading in the DOS interface. And the one thing I want to look at here, just a simple directory listing. And I'm mainly interested in that bottom number, what that shows. And man, that shows a lot of space available, or enough space available on the system that I'm looking at. Of course, putting on a boot manager, but going through and getting Windows 3.1 and likely Windows 95. I could even maybe even load Windows NT on there. The single board computer of the 7588 does have an Ethernet connection, so it's able to be networked. And just so I have a system that has some multiple OSs and I've got those things on it, the aspect here as well is that it's got these nice serial ports connections that are there as well. And get back switch to the camcorder interface so we can go through and look at the SCSI cards that I have planned for this. Now I may go through, and in that instance I may want to keep this on the IDE channel, the zip drive. That's good enough access as well, because I can probably, if I need to have an external CD-ROM drive, or to have a CD-ROM drive, I can easily use my external unit. Very easy to do. And I can probably, let's go through and let's get the internal camera switch off, just so I'm sure I have enough field of view. Because as I discussed on prior videos, the one aspect to this, and it's got the capabilities to run Windows 3.1 and Windows 95, and it also has these serial cable connections. So that'd be good for that client access of the AS400. Of course, I still have that down and running to keep the place a little bit warmer in wintertime out here. But going through on the 7588, it does have PCI slots. We can go through and even open up. I could even get my SkyCam going here and kind of look inside a little bit too. But first up, for the SCSI cards that I have, and this is an Adaptec. I have a lot of Adaptec stuff around as it is. And this is the 2906. I'm not sure what, I'd have to look through for what model this first one is, because the picture shown on the cover is a little bit different from this. And this is for the instance of running something just like those zip drives, just like this SCSI interface zip drive that I have here powered up. And then of course I've got the cable that's still sealed up. It's got the connection for that DB25, because that goes through and you have it marked as a SCSI interface on the bracket, and it's got that DB25 connection, and that doesn't even have, it's got terminating resistors across the internal connection, but there's not even a header on there for anything internal. So this is just to give that 25 pin port for SCSI devices outside, just like what that zip drive has. This would be a perfect card if all I want to do is run the zip drive externally. There's another version that has, of course, the same external connector. Goes through, and of course you don't see the terminating resistors in this occasion, because they don't need to terminate that bus of the internal channel, because then they have, so this would just be the same, and that is marked as 2906. Let's see what this one's, 2902. Okay, so we see some of the Adaptec encoding for that, and we would have the chance to do internal SCSI devices in that instance. So good things, and I mean, I have a few PCI connections that would be available from that backplane to run boards like this. Now inside these, I'll just get to where I'm moving through my stack. Inside these, I've got diskettes, CDs, quite a bit of material otherwise. And just right here on top, I have the Easy SCSI, and that's typically the utility the Adaptec had. And there's the setup diskette, disk 1 of 1 for DOS and Windows 3X. So this would be probably a real good device, or a real good diskette that would go through, be all that would be needed typically to set up one of those 29X two PCI adapters I just showed. And then you have, there's the 1 of 2 for Windows 95, 98, and NT 4.0 and NT 3.51. I'm just telling you how to do those routines. There's the second disk of the set. And then even a version, looks like the same, in fact, this is a slightly earlier version, version 5.0, whereas this is the 5.0C for everything that means, but probably very similar in that regard. And then there's the diskette, the 1 of 2, and then SCSI Select version 1 for the 2906, just like we had there. It also has some, I've got some Easy CD Creator CDs that are in here, just for some side functions. There's the CD-ROM for the 2906 for Power Macintosh systems. So you could go through and put that 2906 in there. All the sorts of installation guides. There's for the Macintosh side. So that would go through and see there we've got a little bit more colorful for the whatever this does, installation guide. And then the Adaptec Easy SCSI Standard Edition. Just a quick reference. I've got all the materials. I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily have to search on Google or find web pages. There's the user reference. So these would probably be good manuals to go through and check the contents of the disk. I can go through and archive those. I'm sure that Easy SCSI is out there, even later versions. So that's the 290X PCI sort of board that I could try. If I wanted a little bit more elaborate, and that's going to where it's got the EEPROM, and that's required for running a hard drive, booting from a hard drive connected to the interface. Those 290X boards, without a BIOS on there, would not. They just run SCSI devices like a CD-ROM drive or the zip drive. And so that's a little bit more elaborate. We go to the high density, that HDB50, just like my tweener system has on it. In fact, this is like a 2940, as it says down there. Yeah, 2940, and very standard PCI adapter that is very useful for these instances as well. Of course, I've got the cables that go through, since I do have that cable down from the tweener system and have it connected in. And then it's got that internal connection as well, even activity LEDs and a header for the LEDs. You can have to go to the front panel to show that hard drive in operation, or any of that, any drive on that bus, the activity. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be Adaptec in a manner either. This is a board that is with a future domain chipset. Now it does have a label on it, 2920. It's an AHA 2920. And then it has an Adaptec BIOS chip that's in there as well. And because Adaptec did go through and did purchase future domain. So even with that future domain chipset on there, ultimately this is at a time frame where it was owned by Adaptec. And it's got that has the high density 50-pin connector on the back, and then the internal connector as well. So that would be another option, but very similar to the Adaptec board. Now, I went through, and it's funny because when I was looking through my cables, this is the cable for that high density to the DB25 for the zip drive. And it didn't say anything on this packaging, but when I got to this one, and this is just 3 foot, and it says Max SCSI 1 to 3 is a label, or PC SCSI 3 to zip drive. I found it funny that it mentions that zip drive in particular. And this is actually a fast wide connection, 68-pin high density. And I even thought that the zip drive didn't mention it was not necessarily compatible with the SCSI 3 being that fast wide connector, but this goes through and works. I mean, it just uses a narrow side, and you can only have so many devices connected to it. But this apparently would give the functionality to connect up that zip drive to a fast wide connector. And that's a little bit of in a sense of an overkill by this. This is a 2940, Ultra. I mean, and I love these Adaptec boards. Very nice packaging, and it goes through to where I've got, and this is not the original shrink wrap, but it's got, you know, these connections as that cable is, that fast wide connection, high density 68 pin connector, and goes through, it has solder pads for the EEPROM, of course, but it reduces, it's got actually surface mount EEPROMs basically for, and those might even be a flash chip as well, to go through and upgrade those and upgrade the firmware. But this has those fast, wide, and even just a regular 50-pin SCSI connection on for the internal connectors. And very great board. I mean, this is a little bit of an overkill if I were to put this in a PCI slot. But at least I have cables. I could ultimately go through and could connect in that zip drive, and then I have even cables that go down to the high density 50 pins for like my, or the Centronics for running that external CD-ROM drive I have. And the same thing here, it's got the diskettes here for the, you know, these are still sealed packs. And even still on this diskette version, and this is version 5.01 of the Easy SCSI. For Windows 95, 98, and NT, disk 1 of 1. Even has an internal cable, a 50 pin. And then, of course, all the stuff on Easy SCSI for the deluxe edition. And this apparently came out prior to the time of Windows 2000, and then it's not recommending that you install this on Windows 2000. And probably you could find something more on the internet of a comparable version that would be certified for the Windows 2000 and even later. So there's a lot of the user reference, user guides, the guide to the Easy SCSI Deluxe Edition. Even has this read this and some installation tips. So I'm getting even ahead of the sense of the DOS angle, even with these. I mean, these are probably a little bit of overkill for all that for a DOS environment. That's why I would like to have that a little bit lower level board. I don't necessarily need something this advanced for this type of system. And really with the main bus on the backplane, I do have those serial multi-port serial adapters in there, but I have more space. There's the thought that even an Adaptec controller the same way. It's got the BIOS for the hard drive, if you want to do that, and then that high density 50 pin connector and the internal 50 pin connector, the activity header, and the configuration switches. This also is effectively has the diskette controller chip as well. And these can be set for this to be a secondary floppy disk controller. So with that header for connecting drives up to that, at least 2 drives up to that, this may even be a better option for me. As the SCSI connection I need, and it also gives me that diskette connections really for the purposes of Windows 3.1, Windows 95, Windows 98, or Windows NT. this is going to be enough. I mean, for the performance of just me interacting with whatever SCSI devices, because it does have those IDE drives in the system. So there's even room for an ISA bus device in here. This backplate, I can probably even still count some of the connections that I could have for this. And so I see at least 2 ISA slots, and I see with everything else in there, and I might have a slot that would be kind of tight on the CPU board, the single board computer side. But there's another shared slot that looks like a PCI and ISA that's shared over here. That would be the slot I'd have to do for a PCI adapter in there. And I'm not discounting that, but I'm just saying that the ISA board might be a better way for me to go through and add SCSI to the system and have those connections I needed for the SCSI devices. So just kind of checking out the preliminary stuff and making sure that I've got it set up in the right way prior to doing it. And I think I have a lot of parts and everything else I need. I've got all the adapters, all the cables, everything like that. Now, do you see my microphone light is blinking, probably running out of power, so I can, perfect timing, I can close this out quick and say, you know, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click on that like button. Subscribe to my channel if you have not done so already. But this is IBM Museum. That's all I have for now. Thank you.